Guys, I know that, of course, on Tuesday, me and Curtis went live talking about Omega, which is still the great name of Omega Blake at wide receiver. You two, of course, you and Andrew went live yesterday talking about Courtney Crutchfield, and the wide receiver room just got a little bit more improved, and there's the excitement factor there. And, of course, we're not going to see these guys in the bowl game, but it doesn't matter. But it's just fun to see how things have – not saying people are just pumped up, excited, ready to run through a brick wall and think everything's back. But there has been at least a little bit better positive vibes over the Christmas holiday for Razorback fans, being able to get a couple of wide receivers that not only did they want, but they actually feel like can contribute right away and be a major part of this offense. So the vibes are high, at least for Razorback fans for now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. Poor Ronnie Fouch has been walking around that receiver room like John Calipari when he got to Arkansas. There is no room. There are no receivers. Well, they got some now, and so that's a good thing. And it's interesting how they did early work in the portal at receiver. They went out and got Raylan Sharp and Cam Shanks pretty quick. I mean, that was pretty early on. And then we kind of waited and waited and waited. And you were wondering, like, when they were going to land somebody. Like Kendrick Law came and went. The Jordan Dwyer guy that they were excited about is going to TCU. And you're like, all right, so what's really going on here? Omega Blake been at the top of the list for me in terms of the guys that have been connected to Arkansas. We talked about him a lot, but they needed some more size and length at the receiver position. They needed a deep threat. He checks all those boxes, and then they just needed more talent. And whether Courtney Crutchfield has produced at all at the college level yet, the answer to that is no, he hasn't. But he is certainly talented enough to be a guy that you would think could factor into the receiver room at Arkansas. So they're starting to put some pieces together there. And of course, you're going to get excited when you get pass catchers. Anybody that can produce stats, that's going to excite everybody. A receiver, a running back, a quarterback, people get excited about that. The real ball knowers understand that it's all about what happens in the trenches. The casuals, though, are going to get excited about the people that put up the stats.
For sure. Arkansas desperately needed to make something shake in the transfer portal at wide receiver. And we talked about it a lot yesterday, I think they're probably one move away. I think they still are going to bring in at least one more, and they probably need to. I mean, you're replacing a lot, and you just don't have much that you can really count on with this receiver room, even with some of those guys that they brought in. And so, yeah, they need production any way they can get it. I feel a little bad because, like, I don't want to be the guy who like rains on everyone's parades all the time. I don't want to do the thing where every time they land a commit, I'm like, well, are you sure? So I've noticed that like a lot of people are more excited about the transfer class so far than I am. And since it's still kind of Christmas and I'm trying to, put my best foot forward, I'm just going to keep a lot of my takes to myself on Arkansas's roster and sort of how I feel about it. But yeah, at receiver, Arkansas, no doubt. I mean, Omega Blake, that's one that I certainly really like. I'm a huge fan of his work. And Courtney Crutchfield, I like the vision there. I like taking a chance on a talented guy. And I agree with your assessment, Curtis, that I feel a lot better about Arkansas's offense and what they're going to be able to accomplish because I feel like they upgraded so much at tackle on the offensive line. Still not 100% sure what they're doing at guard. I still think they need to kind of figure that out, whether it's with the current roster or in the portal. But I feel like you would rather have a weakness at guard than tackle. So I am pretty optimistic that Arkansas has actually upgraded their offensive line, which in turn should upgrade everything else around the room, with Taylor Green especially.
Well, if that's the way you feel about not wanting to be that guy today, you're going to really hate our question of the day when we get to it because I feel like it's probably going to get brought up. So I'm just going to apologize in advance because you're probably going to hate it. But the thing is, like to your points though of the offensive side, I agree because I believe that I'm in a position. Even Sam Pittman kind of talked about it in his press conference, which we'll play a couple of clips there later in the show. But he even talked about like, hey, we upgraded heavily in the offense. I think it's what he felt like. He was very confident in how that was even before they officially signed Omega Blake and Courtney Crutchfield. So you would think that because of that, it's really been elevated. I think the fascinating part about this, guys, is like we talked about, Taylor Green coming back and Bobby Petrino coming back is a rare thing, not just because you have a quarterback and coordinator coming back at the same time, but also because everybody else around him is changing. The coordinator's the same, the quarterback's the same, but everybody else has changed. And I know it's really early in the game. We haven't gone through spring ball. We're way past it. But I am still curious on how this offense is going to look next year comparatively speaking to this past year. And I'm not talking about just numbers and stats. I'm talking about the format of the offense. You know, is the play calling and the type of formations going to be the same? Is there going to be more quarterback reads or less because of the wide receivers not being ginormous of a bunch of 6'4" and above guys? Is it suddenly going to become a different type of route running that's going to go through it? That's what I think is the most interesting part about this, is now we're starting to see what the offense is looking like and how it's going to take shape when it comes to the running backs, when it comes to wide receivers and the offensive line. Still got to do some work with the tight end position, but I'm going to be interested to see if it's the same setup, but just different players doing it, or if it's going to be a completely different product, completely different type of offense on the field next season.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty fascinating. I'd agree with you, man. It's I think part of the excitement initially was thinking, all right, like they're gonna have this continuity. So the schematics in general, just the plan offensively, will take a step forward next season. They're not going to have that necessarily, but we'll just kind of see what happens. You do have the quarterback aspect of it, and that's really important for sure in terms of the talent that they're putting in. I think that they're kind of on track to, it's like sufficiently replace what they've lost. And that's good. Like you absolutely have to do that. So, considering what's out the door so far, and they've still got work to do, like I'm pretty happy with what's coming in from that standpoint. I don't think that they've made massive upgrades to this roster to the point where I'm going to be calling for 8-9 wins next year. I think they're just kind of, replacing what they're losing here. Now, the question is, like, offensively, they were top 20 in the country in, yardage and a lot of those different statistics, but they couldn't really finish. Like they had a hard time getting in the end zone. They struggled in the red zone. The interesting thing about some of the struggles that they had, those are some of the areas that you feel like in year 2 of your quarterback and your coordinator, those are things that improve. And if they do, you start scoring some more points, then, hey, maybe you're in business.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see, because with some of these receivers and even the running back room, we just don't know exactly how it's going to shake out. Who are going to be the go-to guys? Who are going to be the guys that they are scheming to draw stuff up around? But ultimately, guys, offenses, last I checked, are still built around the quarterback. And that's the one place where Arkansas does have, I guess you could use that term, continuity. And I feel like we spend so much time talking about the running back room, talking about the receivers, talking about, tight end, can they replace Luke Az? Even the offensive line. We kind of overlook Taylor Green, not, I overlook's probably not the right term, but it's just something we don't talk about because he's the one returning piece where it's not something we need to discuss, especially during portal season. But when you're talking about this offense and what it's going to look like, he's still the number one main driving force of that. And so I think his development is going to be huge. I think what he's comfortable doing are going to be a very important thing about what this offense is able to do. We'll see what he builds with this wide receiver room in terms of chemistry. But when you're talking about this Arkansas offense and what it's going to look like, whether that's schematics or just potency and competence, I think it goes through Taylor Green. And so I think if you're a Hog fan and you're trying to kind of build your case for why this offense would take a massive step forward in 2025, it has to start and finish with Taylor Green. You have to buy into the idea that Bobby has a plan for him, and these receivers that they brought in can kind of complement that plan, but that it's going to be built around him and that he takes that next step forward. Because if you're upgrading at the quarterback position, which obviously they're not upgrading in terms of talent in versus talent out, it's the same guy. But if Taylor Green takes that massive step forward and is a much better version of himself in 2025, all of a sudden we'll feel a lot better about this receiver room, the running back room, even the tight ends, and the offensive line. We'll see how that works out. But I do think if you're an Arkansas fan and you're trying to think about what can this offense do in 2025, you got to remember Taylor is the big X factor here. If he's a much better version of the guy he was in 2024, you can talk me into a lot of things with this Arkansas offense.
Well, I know this, may surprise some people, but I'm a pretty big Bobby Petrino fan, and I always have been. I don't know if anyone knew that. And I was still big on him coming into this season, and I still feel like, looking at the numbers like you just read off, Curtis, and where they ranked and everything, the offense did a pretty solid job. They weren't perfect at times, but compared to where they were the year before, where they're at now, it's vastly improved. However, there's no excuses for anything anyways, because you're already on borrowed time. But if next season, considering how the offense is going and considering having Taylor Green back and assuming everyone stays healthy, because that's also a big part of it, if this offense does not improve from what it was this past season, then it's all on Bobby Petrino. It really is, because You are somebody who walked into a situation in Petrino where Pittman's like, hey, go get your quarterback. And he did. But he didn't say, hey, go get your wide receivers, because they had wide receivers. Then we're going to change that. Or, hey, go get your offensive lineman, because that was between Pittman and Mateo. So trying to just rebuild that thing. And he didn't say, hey, go get your tight ends, because they were set at tight ends. Well, they lost all their tight ends. They lost all their wide receivers. They lost pretty much the running backs too. And so now it's like, all right, Petrino, you picked your quarterback last year and you're sticking with that quarterback. He's your guy still. Now go get your wide receivers, because you got your wide receiver coach. Go get them. These are the guys that Petrino and Fouch have chosen, the ones they're bringing in. Same with the running back situation. Yes, they lost a bunch of running backs. They got one back with Braylon Russell, but it's like, hey, go get your running backs. You're going to need them next season. Go get your tight ends, because we don't have any right now. So now I'm expecting, whether it's right or wrong, I'm expecting this offense to be a much better, improved product far and away overall next season than what it was this past season, because these are the ones that you chose, Bobby Petrino. These are the guys you wanted. So you better make sure that next season, even though you lost all these players, that offense better be improved, because there's no excuses. These are the ones you wanted to put into place.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable to have that expectation for all the reasons you outlined. I think you might be disappointed when all is said and done. But no, I mean, that makes sense. That's been a big part of it. And some of the times when, like Arkansas was scuffling in the red zone, or maybe they weren't turning like yardage production into points or whatever, yeah, a lot of people would point back to, well, did you see him year one, the first time at Arkansas? Did you see him year one here and there? It's always really turned the corner in year two. That was just kind of like the built-in thing that eventually became this is always the plan, right? For having the year two of the Bobby Petrino thing. So I get it 100%. I also think part of the plan was to have, obviously, like they were going to go out and get guys anyway. That's a fact. They were going to go out and try to get some pieces to improve the roster. But I guarantee you that they anticipated having more continuity returning next year than they do. And so should that change expectations I don't think it should. I really don't. So I'm kind of with you on that. And we'll see what happens, man. There's so much wait and see involved in this, with me. And I think there are a couple positions that they're better at offensively. I think there's a couple that they're clearly worse at. The wide receiver thing, I'm just fascinated by, because I look at it and I'm like, man, I love Omega Blake. I don't love him as much as I did Andrew Armstrong. I know it's not a one-off comparison, but like, you need Omega Blake's numbers at Charlotte to transfer over completely to Arkansas. Like, he needs to be that good at Arkansas as he was at Charlotte. You need Courtney Crutchfield, who does not have a statistic, to be about that good, in his first year of actual production at Arkansas. Like, there are a lot of variables there that need to work in your favor for this thing to work out. I'm not saying they can't. It's just going to be, it's very much wait and see for me.
Yeah, Curtis, when you were going on that, I kind of started thinking back to what we talked about with Sam Pittman, where we will take you at your word. Whatever you say, we will operate. Whether we think you're lying, whether we think it's true, whether we believe it or not, we're going to take you at your word, and that's what we're going to judge you on. And so, look, when Arkansas started having this mass exodus, Luke Has leaves, Satania leaves, Kudus, Nichols, all these guys, everyone kind of, when I say everyone, not everyone, I know it's not everyone, but a lot of people kind of went with Bobby Petrino's got to get his guys. He wants to start fresh with his offense, and Pittman didn't say that, but that was kind of the take that they went to the press guy. That was their PR stance, was like, hey, we just got to go get in our guys. We feel like we can build a pretty good roster. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I have my opinions, but again, we will just take this staff and this fan base at their word. So, I agree. When you get into the 2025 season, I don't think that your expectations can be, it's a work in progress, and maybe year two, maybe year three with Bobby. It's like, no, this is the route you guys wanted to go. You wanted to clean house, allegedly. You wanted to let all these guys walk. So this is the team you have. Can you make it work? I'm not going to buy any of those excuses of, we would have had a good offense, but Kudus left. We would have had a good offense, but Satania. It's like you claimed in the moment that you wanted those guys out of there, and you wanted to build with your own guys. And so now here are your guys. You've got, Crutchfield, you've got Sharp, you've got Omega Blake. Like, you've got all these guys. This is the offense you went out and chose, kind of to your point, John. You wanted your receivers. Here are your receivers. Mm-hmm. What can you do with them? You don't get to point the finger and blame anyone else if the offense sucks this year. And so it is going to be interesting. I also just come back to, obviously, there's a lot of pressure on Arkansas as a program, big picture. Like, they just have to perform in 2025. But I think these coordinators as well, by Petrino, there's a lot of pressure because of all those reasons you outlined, John. He got his quarterback. He went and got his receivers. They let all these offensive linemen walk and decided to rebuild it through the portal again. And so it pretty much has to work. And if it doesn't, that's going to probably be it for the entire coaching staff.
Well, and I'll also throw this in because I know we'll get to some of your chats, folks. But going to the point of Crutchfield and a guy who has no stats and some of these other players too, this is what you're going to have to hope for. Yep. You're going to have to hope for, in this instance of Crutchfield, which I know a year can make a difference, but you're going to have to hope that Bobby Petrino knows what to do with Courtney Crutchfield in a way that Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri did not know what to do with him. You're going to hope that they're going to say, hey, I see this wide receiver over there. I know exactly how I can make him a pivotal part of our offense, even though Missouri didn't play the dude whatsoever. You're also hoping that when it comes to Omega Blake or whoever it is from these smaller schools, that Petrino or Fouch or whoever identified that and says, I see this guy over here, and I see something that these other schools may not have seen in him to give him a chance at wide receiver. I see something where I can bring him in right now, and he can be a major part of our offense. That's the hope that you're having to have and the faith you're having to have in the coaching staff, which they absolutely could do. But when it comes to all the wide receivers and the guys that they've added, I like them. I like the type of potential that they have. But for someone like Crutchfield especially, it's more of me being just hopeful. I'm hopeful that Petrino saw something in him and saw something in his game that can translate onto the field easier than what Missouri did, which kind of sounds crazy when you think about it, but that's the hope that you have. Because people are going to, I'm just telling you right now, people are going to be extremely disappointed and pissed off if next season Courtney Crutchfield is like Luke has this year, where it was just kind of, he was there. So, but okay, so he's not do anything with him? Like, you didn't bring him in? You felt like this guy is he just not very good? If he's not very good, why'd you bring him in? Or is he just not being featured? I don't know, but there's just that pressure that comes along with it, just hoping that this coaching staff knows what they're going to do with these players because these are the ones you're going after.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right, man. I mean, you just hope that that projections and talent and recruiting rankings, because all those are based on what people think you're going to be when you get there. You just hope that all those people were right. And you can look at it in Missouri in a couple different ways. Like, yes, they had Luther Burden and Theo Weiss, who are two of the better receivers in the SEC. But there are also more than two receivers that are on the field. And there's also a two deep. It wasn't like he was just out there for a bunch of snaps and not getting targets or whatever. So, like, what was it? What was the learning curve there? And then you wonder and hope that in his redshirt season there at Missouri that he did learn a lot and developed a lot, became a better player. And I don't know how he would have factored into things at Missouri next season. I do know that, like, everybody knows this, but like my dad, he lives there and he's a Missouri fan. He's been up there for 30 years or whatever. And I just kind of asked him about it yesterday. Like, what's the vibe at Mizzou for, losing Crutchfield and him going back to Arkansas and everything. And he was just kind of like, no, nobody's really talking about it, and so, and maybe that's just because he was, unseen, unheard as a true freshman, but it doesn't seem like they're, in shambles over the situation. So we'll see how it plays out, man. But I do hope anytime you have an in-state kid that comes back home, you really want it to work out. There's like added pressure on him, fair or not, added pressure on him to come in and be a dude right away. And I hope he does, man. I hope he comes in and pops off and becomes an NFL draft pick for the Razorbacks. But, it's going to be, they got their work cut out for him here. That's all.
Yeah, I've gotten kind of the same vibe. I thought it was very interesting whenever Broussard committed to Arkansas and then Crutchfield a couple days later, and fans were like, "Hey, good to see Arkansas stealing from Ole Miss and Missouri." And I was like, "Well, did they steal?" But no, I do think that's a good point. And also, I think with Crutchfield and McCoy, we talked about this, how those are guys that are highly rated that haven't played yet. Arkansas needs those guys to be what they were billed as coming out of high school. And I think if you're Arkansas, and again, you're kind of looking for that case for your team being good, I think if there's it has to kind of start with the head coach and go down. You have to get this entire group, offensive line, receivers, running back, to all kind of believe, hey, y'all are the misfit toys. Nobody else wanted you. Ole Miss didn't want you. They came and poached the whole roster. They didn't even look your way. Missouri had you, and they didn't want you. And I think Arkansas has to kind of position themselves as the team and the program and the coaching staff, as we were talking about earlier, that can get the most out of these players that weren't necessarily doing great at their other stops or weren't really necessarily viewed as high-level guys like a Raylan Sharp or someone like that. And so I think if you're Arkansas and this coaching staff by Petrino and even on the defensive side with Travis Williams, on paper, you can look at it, and on paper, it would tell you that Arkansas is not going to have a good football team next year. Now, that's not my opinion. That's just kind of comparing them to the rest of their teams, comparing them to the rest of the SEC teams. The 24/7 team talent composite won't come out until like July, August. But when it comes out, Arkansas is not going to be a top 25 team. They're not going to be a top 10 team in the SEC. So on paper, again, the paper would indicate that Arkansas is not going to be good, but it's up to this coaching staff to find the right pieces to elevate the talent in the room and make them better and find the right fit for some of these guys. And I think guys like Courtney Crutchfield are kind of he's not the story of the offseason, but he's a good microcosm of what Arkansas is trying to do. Find a talented guy, take a swing on him. Other schools might have looked at him, like his own school, Missouri, looked at him and kind of didn't think he was super valuable. Find a way to make him valuable, and then you can be the team that kind of makes fun of everyone else and be like, hey, you're paying for all these cats that suck. We just found the ragtag group and we made them good. And so I think that if you're Arkansas, that's kind of what you have to be going for. And I think this coaching staff really has to embrace that and get their team to embrace that as well.